Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela Yaga, the exhibition manager here at AMOCA, and you are at CJ's Talk. Now, first off, I just want you to know that this space is temporary. This is not typically what the museum looks like. We're under renovation. We're going to be creating a lot more spaces for collections and education. So if you have any questions about that, just find our executive director, Beth Ankerstein, and she'll let you know a little more. But let me tell you something about our artist. If you guys weren't here for the opening, Cj Jilek has their exhibition going on in our vault called Systematic Erosion. And it is a wonderful art exhibition of ceramics and mixed media sculpture addressing social justice for women. This also explores the erosion of women's rights locally, nationally, and internationally, while highlighting women's rights, as Jilek explains, using botanical forms as metaphors for women. Cj Jilek is a studio artist and educator with an extensive exhibition record, has worked in the ceramics field for over 25 years, and a faculty member of CSUSB, Mount SAC, and Chaffey College, and I'm sure many other colleges as well. She holds an MFA from Utah State. Cj has taught multiple workshops in Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand, and throughout the US. Her ceramics journey includes a wood fire utilitarian wares to mid-range biomorphic sculptures. The natural environment inspires Jilek and informs her animated sculptures and signature surfaces. Now, I'm going to pass it on to CJ.
Thank you for coming to my artist talk. I'm looking out at the faces, and I know many of you, which is very nice to see you all again. That also means that a lot of you know where I started from. So I was originally a utilitarian potter years ago, and I started ceramics, which was over 25 years ago now. And I did utilitarian work for a little while, and then I decided that as more complex as my compositions became, that I really was kind of outgrowing that format. So I then started looking around, and once I started looking around, I realized that I had a lot more things that I wanted to say and a lot more things I was interested in. And I started drawing my inspiration from plants and flowers. So I was always one of those kids that would play outside and would be investigating things and looking at everything on a micro level, checking out the grass, checking out how flowers were built, all of that. And so as I started wandering around and noticing some of these plants that are in our world, I just thought this is the perfect format for the next body of work that I wanted to create. So at that point in time, I was heading off to graduate school, and I decided that I was going to make a complete shift from utilitarian to sculptural work, and that I would start using those plant forms as metaphors for things that happen. You know, the one thing about plants is they put it out there, right? And the great thing about plants is that at the same time that they put it out there, it's acceptable to look at and to be seen, and it's not offensive. So it just opens up a conversation, and it's, you know, it's that idea of we get more bees to honey, right? So let's use the flowers to do it. So here are some of the images that I've taken around the world of some of my plant research. I've been to Australia, Indonesia, New Zealand, all over the place, Poland, places you wouldn't think of necessarily for flowers, but I'm always looking, always inspired by new compositions, new textures, color combinations. I just find them so inspiring, every part of them. And so I came back, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background first on how I made that transition from utilitarian to sculptural. I feel a lot of people tend to ask me, like, how did you get here? So here's how I got there. So there were a few transitional pieces. So this is a piece that I created probably in 2007 or 2008, and I had stopped wood firing. I was exploring color, I was exploring surfaces, and trying to just pull in all these different textures and colors. So I dropped down to cone 6 for those ceramic artists that are in the audience, and started playing around with what I could pull out of that color. And you can see this first piece, there's still that vessel form, that idea of, can I really let go of the function? before I truly went sculptural. Took a little while to completely let go of the wood fire as well. So this piece, the flower is a piece that hangs on the wall, and the shelf that this flower hangs on is still wood fired. And you can see I'm pushing these sculptural boundaries of the plants a little bit more. Originally, they're a little bit literally transformed. And I wanted to start pushing elements of the sexuality of the plants, right? So you see a little bit more detail on the interior of the forms. And as I got more and more comfortable with working with the different plant forms, I started to push them and abstract them more and more. So this is a piece from my MFA show. I'm having a little fun with it. This is called Tongue in Cheek. I think you can see the reference, right? In many ways, shapes, and forms. So these original forms, of course, the petal form was based off of a tongue. And the other form, which we can see many different human anatomy parts in, was actually based off of a grape seed. So, and it all ties back to those plants and trying to pull that imagery out. Here's another series made from that tongue-in-cheek series. This set is called Ripening. And I'm utilizing a slight change in the shape and a change in color and surface to get that feeling of growth and change. Then I started exploring the relationship between forms. And for a long time now, I've been working with two ceramic pieces together to see how I can play with that relationship and give a sense of attraction between the two pieces. With this body of work, I was trying to question ideas of attraction and what does everyone individually for themselves find attractive and alluring? And, you know, what does their instinct tell them? What is it saying to them? And so I wanted to play that relationship up between the two plants in the images. And so they look like if, you know, the lights went out in the gallery, hopefully they're going to get up and move and do something. So this one here, these next two images are a little difficult to make out. It seems a little confusing because they're actually displayed in water. And I wanted that reference of what I was thinking the plants were going to do. As you're viewing these in person when they're displayed in water, that reflection, the plants actually do look like they're reaching out and touching each other in the reflection. So it just alludes a little bit more to that playfulness of the forms. And here's another one that is also displayed in water. And depending on what angle you were at, it would just look like those tentacles were reaching out and touching one another. Oftentimes you'll see in my work, there's a relationship between the idea of male and female. And at first it was quite literal. There was a female plant and there was a male plant. You'll find later on in the work that I do tend to mix up the reference to male and female body parts in the same piece, because I feel that we all have some femininity to us. We all have some masculinity to us. And what's presenting itself at any given day changes all the time. So I do tend to mix it up a little bit more between the forms now, instead of keeping it segregated to one particular form. This one was a small maquette. This one was still a little bit on the literal side, but as I started working through some of these ideas, then things became a little bit more abstracted. So this was a maquette for a larger piece. This one overall is probably about 9 inches tall, but was the maquette for this piece, which is about 4 to 5 feet tall. And it has an arm. The arm that's coming out of this piece actually articulates it. You can move it and interact with it. So this is also where I started to push my surfaces and my materials. So the surfaces on this piece incorporate rubber and flocking, paint, what else? Shoe polish, all kinds of things, just to get those surfaces that I wanted. I found it was interesting to just explore and push past the typical ceramic materials. And as much as I enjoy that, I do find myself continually coming back to ceramic materials because I really do enjoy the permanency of them. And with some of the new materials on the market, we're able to do so much with them. So this is a more current piece. This is from 2017. And for this piece, I was really playing with that relationship and trying to find a way that you could have a piece that the message was changed from the angle in which you were viewing it. So the title of this piece is called Perspective. And in many of our relationships, we don't necessarily have the same perspective all the time. Our perspective changes, right? Because we're not just one person in a relationship. And so I wanted to change this piece as well. So in this particular setting of this piece, it almost appears that the larger form might be dominating the smaller form. And yet, and it is, you know, the smaller form actually resides under the larger form a little bit. I had to open it up a bit to take the photographs, but you can see in the photograph on the right that there really is an overlapping of these two forms. One is really hulking over the other. And yet, if I change this piece and I turn the smaller form around, now suddenly it's like one is protecting the other. It's now suddenly this sense of, you know, an intimacy. And I've always enjoyed that intimacy of making these pieces and building those relationships between the forms. And I'd love to continue working with forms where I do get to play with that perspective. And if you view it from one side of the gallery, what message does it give you? And if you view it from the other side of the gallery, what message do you take away? Here you can also see some of the influences of the plants I showed you at the beginning of the slideshow. So this image on the right, it's the leg of the larger form, and it's a reference from a Banksia tree in Australia. And the Banksia tree has those lobes, and it also has a very fine, soft, kind of velvety feel to it. So I have used flocking on this piece, so that whiter tone that you see between the orange nodes is actually fiber flocking that's on the pieces. So there are some direct references still, and then you can see in the piece on the left that sometimes those references are really pushed to have a much more physical feel, or, you know, human feel. Sometimes I just like to have fun and do a plant study, you know, get some ideas for what the next surface is going to be for the next piece. And continue playing with the relationship and how different textures are going to play off of one another. The reaching of the stamens are going to play off of one another. And I always like to play with the size or the scale of my work. So this piece that we're looking at right here might stand maybe 4 inches tall. It's quite intimate, small scale. You can hold it in the palm of your hand. You can get lost in it and investigate it the same way I used to love to investigate nature when I was young. But as soon as everyone gets comfortable with the fact that I make small stuff, then I like to mix it up. And I gotta go big again, just so no one forgets that I can make big stuff. So this piece was made for the Maloof Garden Sculpture in the Garden show. And both of these pieces are about 3 feet in size. And these are finished with underglazes, so they can be outside and react, you know, not have any reactions with the elements outside. And again, playing with that relationship between the two forms. This is a perfect one where you can really see that use of both feminine and masculine in the same form, right? You start to think, oh, of course, this is, you know, a feminine piece from the image on the left, but then you realize that it almost still has a phallus on it too. So it really integrates both sexes. So just a few more samples of some contemporary pieces that I've made. These are all made in the last year, again, playing with surface and texture and form. Pushing out the idea of the tongue-in-cheek piece again. I always seem to circle back to that set. Just always pushing it a little further and a little further and a little bit more detail. And just continually trying to push the intimacy of the work with the textures, the shapes, and the qualities that you see here. Which brings us up to current day. So almost current day, 2022. I love to travel, as most of you know. I was out traveling in June of 2022. I was driving across the country in the car the day that Roe versus Wade was reversed. So I had some hours in the car to think about that. And it was that day that I came up with my idea for systematic erosion. So systematic erosion, as Pam so wonderfully said in the introduction, is about the systematic erosion of women's rights and human rights around the world. One of the pieces, Autonomy Deteriorated, the Unacknowledged Aftermath, is specifically about the deterioration of women's rights in the US, specifically speaking about abortion. I've always been concerned about women's rights and the idea of women having the autonomy over their own body to make their own choice of what they want to do with their body. And we see that being stripped away again and again. And so I wanted to make a piece that talks about that. And I know that abortion is a polarizing topic, and rightfully so, because there's a lot of lives involved. But I feel that in my case, I feel that one of the lives that are often forgotten are the lives of the children that come from it. So this piece here, I'm gonna go back again. I specifically wanted to show a form that was giving birth and the beauty of that. But I also wanted to say, what is happening with those children? What do they have to look forward to? How are they going to be taken care of? What is going to sustain them? What's going to nurture them? What's going to give them a wonderful life? And is there something to do that? So bringing that to the forefront, I created this piece, and we have the large flower in the middle. I wanted to stay with the botanical imagery because I think it is an imagery that's accessible. So when talking about such a polarizing subject, I think I'm still able to communicate in a way that people are not taking offense immediately, and they might keep their minds open a little bit longer and listen to the message, maybe just a little bit longer, and maybe accept hearing some of what's being said. So I created this large piece, and we created a whole bunch of little pups to be born from this plant form. And as they move from the plant form and out to the edges of the table, they start deteriorating. So they've grown in size, they've experienced some life, and now they just don't have what it takes to strive. And as we see them near the edge of the table, you can see from this, I call them pups. One of these plant pups on the far right image, you can see that it's starting to feel the wear. It's starting to decay, it's starting to suffer. And you can see from the surface of the table, there's not a lot of nutrients there. There's not a lot that's giving life to that pup. And then you can see that some of the pups have since fallen away and they're forgotten on the floor, left on their own, continuing to die and wither away. I try to keep this piece also a little bit on the ambiguous side, because in addition to abortion, this piece is also easily viewed as an environmental piece. What can our planet continue to sustain, right? How many lives can it sustain before we're running out of food and water and everything else that it takes to sustain our lives? So I want to purposely leave that window for people to explore and enjoy this piece from what matters to them. Both messages are important to me, so I figure if somebody walks away with something from either of those messages, we're doing good. The second piece in the show is exploited suffusion. And this piece is about the deterioration of human rights around the world. So this is clearly an international piece for me. And there's a few details that I hid in the piece that I I don't know if other people are gonna pick up on it, but we'll see if you guys, did pick up on it as you were viewing it. So essentially, the main idea is that, you know, we have these plants across the top and we have this strata below them, and we can see that it looks like it's being just leached away. It's just falling or eroding away. And each one of those lines is a metaphor for rights that are being withheld, be it education, equal pay, autonomy to our own bodies, whether it's family rights, you know, internationally, like in some cases, it's the right to live, it's the right to leave your home, it's the right to exist. It's different for everyone. I put in extra strata just because I, as one human being, don't even know everything that all the human beings are going through that are suffering out there. So I wanted to leave that open with some room for interpretation. For the flowers across the top, I chose these 5 flowers because I was trying to find a way to incorporate more than just one point of view. And although it's really hard to split the world up into very strict categories, because you could look at culture, you could look at religion, you could look at age, you could look at sex, there's so many different ways to split it up, but I tried to do it a little bit culturally. So if we start from the right side of the frame, our first plant is a lotus. And because we see the lotus in many of our artistic images, and it's often associated with Asian art, I decided to choose the lotus to represent Asians. And then we have the calla lily. And the calla lily we quite often see in imagery with art from Mexico and South America. So I wanted to use that. I was torn, so almost thinking marigold, because that's such a strong image as well. But I had to take a couple artistic liberties here because calla lilies looked a lot of fun to sculpt. So we went with calla lilies. Next is the protea. So the protea is a flower that's originally from South Africa. We also see it in South America and Australia. And if you are familiar at all with Aboriginal art, you will often see it portrayed in Aboriginal art. So I have this to kind of encompass for Black women. Then I have the bird paradise, which was a request from a dear friend of mine, LGBTQ+. She requested that she be represented as a bird of paradise. So she's in here. And then we have the snapdragon, which is a flower that we often see in European garden, like very structured gardens. So I put the snapdragon in to represent white women. But as you can imagine, anyone could relate to any one of those flowers, right? We've seen these flowers through art, we've seen them in nature. There's so many ways we've seen these flowers, and there's so many gray areas and interactions between people. So I feel if people are going to gravitate to what flower they gravitate to, and that's just wonderful. And all of these flowers are striving to get their roots into that sustenance. And yet there's 3 valves down below, and these 3 valves are where the material is being pulled away. The rights are being denied. So you may ask, why 3 valves? I thought about who is controlling those valves? Who's the puppet master? And I thought about it, and I decided that after reviewing the headlines since 2002 and collecting them and living in that space for quite a while, that the reoccurring themes again and again were society, government, and religion. So that's what each one of the valves stand for. And if you investigate the set of gloves under each valve, you'll see just a few of the headlines, which are still piling up, and I can't seem to stop collecting them for those different entities. So this first pair of gloves is for societal constraints that we are putting on humans. In the middle, we have the government constraints. And on the right side, we have the religious constraints. And I'm going to upload all these images to my website. So if you want to zoom in later and read some of those headlines, you can go to my website and find the upload of the images. For those of you who are in the audience today, you can still go into the exhibition and read them for yourself. This exhibition is going to continue. This is the first stop of multiple stops for this exhibition. And I plan to continue making additional forms for each exhibition that I go to. I have to say, for a first stop for the exhibition, I really do love that it's in the vault. Because just that image of the bars on the vault just kind of hit home again of what's being withheld and what's at risk. So with my hopes of this exhibition, I'm hoping that hopefully when we all go to vote, we will keep it in our heads of what we really do want for ourselves and our children. Now this project, I was so lucky to have my helpers. So I had assistant artists. I was lucky enough to receive a grant from the California Arts Council and the Creative Corps Inland SoCal, which allowed me to hire 4 of my assistant artists to work with me on this project. So on my second stop with this project, my assistant artists get to exhibit with me. So you guys, if you're here today, you can meet Melissa, Bella, Lucia, and Jocelyn, and you can talk to them about their experience and maybe what some of their upcoming plans are for what they will create for their voice in this exhibition. I'm excited to see because we're going to have 4 decades of perspectives being exhibited at that exhibition. And the next stop is going to be in April. And then I hope to continue with multiple stops after that as well. So thank you for coming today. And I will be taking any questions if you guys have questions. And we can also pop back over into the exhibition and walk through it and talk about it. Yes.
How do you study since it's all very botanical, what level of study do you make into the botany of each of those things that you use for your subjects?
Yes. I've studied botany actually all the way back to high school. In high school, I was part of the Future Farmers of America. That's what happens when you live in the Midwest.
Or parts of California.
So yeah, I was on the horticulture team, and in high school, it was my job to know how to identify 500 plants from stems and buds. So I've spent a lot of time looking at the very, very small details of plants. Since then, it's a much more informal process, but I am always investigating new and different plants on every travel that I make. So I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world because I get to travel for ceramics and for plants. So I get to meet people around the world, teaching my workshops and meeting ceramic artists, and then I always leave a day to hit the large botanical gardens or do hikes in areas where I know that I'm going to be seeing some new and interesting specimens. And I have literally thousands of images of plants in my database. So I have many that I can go back and reference, and then I can do further research online if need be. Yes.
You mentioned you traveled widely to look at a variety of plants across the globe. Do you feel that your message as it relates to women and the other things you were trying to convey, even though you used the plants from around the world, is more geared towards being US-centric? Or are you trying to capture these things across the globe as well as the flowers? And if so, how did you capture that there can be very different societal differences in New Zealand versus Poland?
Yes, I would like it to be international, and that is one of the reasons why I'm pulling flowers that are not just US based flowers. I am pulling flowers that are native to other countries, and also that we see in other countries' artworks to try and make that connection between the two. For these two particular pieces, you know, the first one I do feel is US centric because we are so embroiled in the decision about abortion right now. For the second piece, that's the one that I do feel is much more international, and I've reached out with those other plants accordingly. As for the difference in cultures, I hope to bring that up in some of my next pieces. So one of the ones that I have in my mind that I'm about to start working on is a little bit more of a response to what's happening with women in Afghanistan. And I would like to bring in more of a cultural background to that, but it will still use plants as well. Yes.
I have I have a question and a comment.
Okay.
My question is, will you be doing a workshop, not necessarily hands-on for us, but to demonstrate, like in my mind as a potential, you know, sort of ceramic artist, I think, how did she form those petals? Or were they slip cast, or were they, you know, because I can't work big, I'm a big person who works small, but I'm thinking, oh, the delicacy. So is it on your busy agenda that you might be coming back here to your home studio to do some kind of demo of how you make?
Yeah.
The points?
I'm still teaching workshops, so absolutely, I would entertain any requests for workshops. So you might drop that hint to Nathan. Yes.
That is going to be a little difficult. But, and I haven't gone in the vault, but I'm gonna take this thing and go in and see it up close and personal. But this shows, I've been for over 50 years an advocate of both arts and children. And the importance of what I really liked was you said the ambiguity. So someone could come in, child, a person with a completely different point of view, and look at it and say, look at the beauty, look at the aesthetics, look at the flowers. This isn't art that's in your face like some art. It's delicate and it has that aesthetic part. But also, it shows in a way and you said it could be interpreted about the environment and what's left. And the last thing I'll say about it that hit me so closely because of my background working in child development on this whole issue, and I don't say the word, I talk about choice and women's, because I was there fighting for it back in the day. But no one yet, I keep wanting to write that editorial many times, is talking about the outcome for these children. And it even says the people who are anti-women's choices, people's choices, are saying, oh, we'll have to give, it's such an oxymoron. We'll have to have lots of services for these unwanted children. Why should there be unwanted children? So your metaphor of those little buds falling off was so powerful. And yet, you could say, well, there's a flower giving birth. I'll stop now, but it was really poignant what you did, CJ. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I was hoping that we could take it and see it from a broader point of view. Absolutely. Yes.
That brings up, as a Philistine, and a person that has the ability to totally miss the metaphors, that brings up an important point. In this talk, the points you're trying to make are abundantly clear, but when people pass through, they see the beauty And most of us are totally missing the best part. And going crazy with didactics isn't what an artist wants to do, and justifiably so, but we're missing the best part.
Well, there is a write-up in there for people who want to read. We can't always get everyone to read, but if, people want to know what I'm thinking, I do have a write-up in the gallery for that expresses a lot of what I've said today. And I hope to push it even a little bit further, because I almost feel like I was a little too subtle. And I would like to add more pups to that table and more pups to the floor, and maybe just, really push it a little bit more so that it's a little, just by the sheer number, it's a little bit more in your face, and you have to just physically be a part of it a little bit more.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, CJ. This has been a continued conversation, and we also have a new show that just opened last weekend, Reveal, which is recent acquisitions from the last 3 years, and Making in Between Queer Play is in the gallery behind us. So thanks for coming today.